I hadn't heard my daughter's voice in 2 weeks. Not a call, not a text, nothing. And Marissa wasn't the kind to go silent. She checked in every few days like clockwork, even if it was just to send a photo of my granddaughter Quinn eating spaghetti with her hands. But 14 days of silence? That wasn't right. That was wrong in a way I couldn't ignore. So I drove to her house without telling anyone. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself she'd answer the door laughing, saying her phone had died or she'd been too busy. But when I pulled into her driveway and saw the curtains drawn tight in the middle of the afternoon, my stomach dropped. Something was off. I could feel it in my bones. The kind of feeling you get right before the doctor tells you bad news. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Harder this time. Still nothing. Then I tried the door. It was unlocked. I pushed it open slowly, calling her name. The house was dark, silent, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. I stepped inside. The living room looked normal enough at first glance. Quinn's toys were scattered across the carpet. A half-empty juice box sat on the coffee table. But there was a smell. Faint. Stale air mixed with something sour, like the house had been sealed up too long. I walked down the hallway toward the bedrooms. My heartbeat was loud in my chest. I called Marissa's name again. Nothing. I reached Quinn's room first. The door was cracked open. I pushed it wider and stepped inside. The bed was unmade, stuffed animals piled in the corner. Everything looked like a normal 5-year-old's room, except for the smell. It was stronger here, sharper. I stood there for a moment, scanning the room, trying to figure out what was wrong. And then I heard it. A soft scraping sound, coming from under the bed. My breath caught. I froze. The sound stopped, then started again. Slow, deliberate, like something was dragging itself across the floor. Before I dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, please like and subscribe. It helps me keep sharing more. I crouched down. My knees cracked as I lowered myself to the carpet. I could see the edge of the bed skirt hanging just above the floor. The scraping sound came again. Closer this time. My hand shook as I reached for the fabric. I lifted it slowly. And I saw fingers. Small. Pale. Gripping the wooden slats of the bed frame from underneath. My heart slammed against my ribs. I jerked the bed skirt up higher, and there she was. Quinn, my granddaughter, curled up in the narrow space beneath the bed, her eyes wide, her face streaked with dirt. She didn't say anything. She just stared at me, like she didn't recognize me, or like she was afraid to move. I whispered her name. She flinched. I reached out my hand, trying to keep my voice calm, trying not to scare her. But she didn't come out. She just kept staring. And then she whispered something so quiet I almost didn't hear it. She said, "Don't let her hear you." I felt the air leave my lungs. I asked her what she meant. Who was she talking about? But Quinn just shook her head and pressed a finger to her lips. Her eyes darted toward the doorway behind me. And that's when I heard footsteps. Slow, heavy, coming down the hallway. I turned my head toward the door. My body went rigid. The footsteps stopped just outside the room. I could see a shadow stretching across the floor from the hallway light. Someone was standing there, listening. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Quinn's eyes were locked on mine, filled with terror. And then the shadow shifted. The door creaked open wider, and I saw her, Marissa, my daughter, standing in the doorway. But something about her was wrong. Her face was blank, expressionless. Her hair hung limp around her shoulders. Her clothes were wrinkled like she'd been wearing them for days. She looked at me. Not surprised, not angry, just empty. And then she smiled. It wasn't her smile. It was too wide, too slow. Like someone imitating what a smile should look like. She said, "Welcome home, Dad." Her voice was flat, mechanical, I didn't know what to say. I stayed crouched beside the bed, my hand still extended toward Quinn, who had shrunk further back into the shadows. Marissa took a step into the room, then another. I finally found my voice. I asked her where she'd been, why she hadn't answered my calls, why Quinn was hiding under the bed. She tilted her head slightly, like she was considering the question. Then she said Quinn likes it under there. It's her favorite place. I looked back at Quinn. She was trembling, her little hands gripping the bed frame so tight her knuckles were white. I turned back to Marissa. I told her this wasn't normal, that something was clearly wrong, that I was taking Quinn with me. Marissa's smile faded. Her eyes went cold. She said, "You're not taking her anywhere." The way she said it made my blood run cold. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement, a fact, like she knew something I didn't. I stood up slowly. My legs felt weak. I told her I was calling the police. She didn't move. She just stood there, watching me. And then she said, "They won't believe you. No one will." I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. I dialed 911, put the phone to my ear. Marissa didn't try to stop me. She just kept staring. The operator answered. I started to explain, my voice cracking. I told them my granddaughter was in danger, that my daughter wasn't acting right, that I needed help. The operator asked for the address. I gave it. She said officers were on the way. Marissa laughed. It was a soft, bitter sound. She said, "You really don't understand, do you?" I asked her what she meant. She didn't answer. She just turned and walked out of the room. I heard her footsteps disappear down the hallway. I crouched back down and reached under the bed. I told Quinn it was okay. That help was coming. That she was safe now. She hesitated. Then slowly she crawled out. Her arms wrapped around my neck so tight I could barely breathe. She was shaking. I held her. I told her I wasn't going to let anything happen to her. The police arrived 8 minutes later. I met them at the front door with Quinn in my arms. I explained everything. The silence, the smell, Quinn hiding under the bed, Marissa's strange behavior. They listened. Then they asked to speak with Marissa. I told them she'd walked off somewhere in the house. One officer stayed with me and Quinn. The other went to search. He came back a few minutes later. He said the house was empty, no sign of her. I told him that was impossible. She'd been standing right there less than 10 minutes ago. He asked if I was sure. I said of course I was sure. He exchanged a look with the other officer. Then he asked if I'd be willing to let them check under the bed. I said yes. We all went back to Quinn's room. The officer knelt down, lifted the bedskirt, and his face went pale. He pulled out a box, cardboard, taped shut. He set it on the floor and carefully peeled the tape back. Inside were dozens of photos, all of Quinn, sleeping, playing, eating, taken from angles that didn't make sense, like someone had been watching her, documenting her. The officer looked at me. He asked if I knew who took these. I shook my head. I had no idea. He kept digging through the box. Then he pulled out a notebook, flipped it open, and his expression changed. He stood up, told the other officer to call it in. I asked what was in the notebook. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "We need to find your daughter. Right now." The notebook sat on Marissa's kitchen table like a loaded gun. I couldn't stop staring at it even though the officer had told me not to touch anything. Quinn was in the living room with a female officer who'd arrived as backup. She'd wrapped my granddaughter in a blanket and was trying to get her to drink some water, but Quinn hadn't said a word since we'd come out of that bedroom. She just sat there, staring at nothing. The lead officer, whose name I'd learned was Detective Ramos, stood across from me with latex gloves on. He'd been flipping through the notebook for the past 5 minutes. His jaw was tight. His eyes moved fast across the pages. Then he stopped, looked up at me, asked how long I'd known about my daughter's condition. I told him I didn't know what he meant. He turned the notebook around so I could see. The page was filled with Marissa's handwriting. But it wasn't coherent sentences. It was fragments, repeated phrases. She's watching me. She knows. She's in Quinn. Get her out. Get her out. Get her out. Over and over, hundreds of times. My throat went dry. I told him I'd never seen her write anything like that Marissa had always been stable, a good mother. He flipped to another page. This one had dates, times, detailed logs of Quinn's behavior. March 7th, 3:14 a.m., Quinn standing at foot of bed, not blinking. March 9th, 2:30 a.m., found Quinn in kitchen, staring at knives. Didn't respond to her name for 6 minutes. March 12th, Quinn drew picture of woman with no face. Said the woman visits her at night. I felt my stomach turn. Detective Ramos asked if Quinn had ever mentioned anything like that to me. I shook my head. But even as I did it, I remembered something. Last Christmas, Quinn had been quieter than usual. She'd drawn a picture at my house, a stick figure family. But there was another figure off to the side, taller, with long black scribbles for hair. No face, just a blank circle. I'd asked her who it was. She'd said my other mommy. I'd laughed it off, thought it was just kid imagination. Now the memory made my skin crawl. Ramos kept reading. He said your daughter believed someone or something was living inside Quinn, that it had been there for months, that she'd been documenting it, trying to prove it. I asked him if he thought Marissa had hurt Quinn. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, we don't know yet, but we need to find her. Fast. He radioed for additional units. Told them to search the surrounding area, check nearby parks, friends' houses, anywhere Marissa might go. I told him she didn't have many friends. She'd been a single mom since Quinn's father left when she was pregnant, mostly kept to herself. Ramos asked if there was anyone Marissa trusted, anyone she might reach out to. I thought about it. Then I remembered. Her old college roommate, Vanessa. They'd stayed in touch. Marissa had mentioned her a few times over the years. I gave Ramos the name. He wrote it down, said he'd have someone track her down. Then he asked me to walk him through the house, show him anything that seemed out of place. We started in the living room. Everything looked normal at first. Toys, books, a laundry basket half full of folded clothes. But then Ramos pointed to the corner near the window. There were scratches, deep gouges in the drywall, like someone had clawed at it. He asked if I knew what caused that. I didn't. He took photos. We moved to the kitchen. The sink was full of dishes, dried food crusted on plates, the trash can overflowed. But what caught my eye was the refrigerator. It was covered in drawings. Quinn's artwork held up with magnets. Ramos started pulling them down, one by one. Most of them were normal kid stuff. Rainbows, flowers, our family. But the ones underneath were different, darker, drawn in black crayon. Figures with too many limbs, eyes that didn't belong on human faces. And in almost every single one there was the same tall figure with no face standing in the background. Ramos bagged several of them as evidence. Then we went upstairs. Marissa's bedroom door was closed. Ramos pushed it open slowly. The smell hit me immediately. Stale sweat, unwashed sheets. The curtains were drawn. The room was dim, clothes piled on the floor, the bed unmade. But what stopped me cold was the wall above her bed. It was covered in paper, taped edge to edge. Newspaper clippings, printed articles, handwritten notes. All of it connected with red string like some kind of conspiracy board. Ramos stepped closer, started reading out loud. Stories about children who drowned under mysterious circumstances, kids who'd gone missing and were found days later with no memory of where they'd been, articles about sleep disorders, dissociative episodes, parasomnia, and in the center of it all was a printout of an old photograph. Black and white, grainy. It showed a woman standing in a doorway, long dark hair, but her face was blurred, smudged, like the photo had been damaged. Underneath it, Marissa had written in red ink, "She's real." Ramos pulled out his phone, took pictures of everything. I asked him what he thought it meant. He said, "Honestly, I think your daughter was experiencing a psychological break. Maybe postpartum psychosis that went untreated. Maybe something else. But she clearly believed something was happening to Quinn." I wanted to argue, to defend Marissa, but I couldn't, because part of me was starting to wonder if she'd been right. Ramos's radio crackled. A voice came through. "We found her." He asked where. The voice said, "Sullivan Park, East Entrance. She's just sitting on a bench, not moving." Ramos told them to secure the area, not to approach until he got there. He looked at me, said, "I need you to stay here with Quinn. I'll bring Marissa back." I nodded. He left. I stood alone in that bedroom, staring at the wall of madness my daughter had created. And then I heard it. A voice. Faint. Coming from down the hall. Singing. I walked toward the sound. It was coming from Quinn's room. I pushed the door open. Quinn was standing in the center of the room, still wrapped in the blanket. But her back was to me. She was singing a lullaby. Softly. One I didn't recognize. I said her name. She stopped, turned around, and smiled. But it wasn't Quinn's smile. It was too wide, too slow, just like Marissa's had been. She said, "Grandpa, why did you call them?" Her voice sounded wrong, flat. My heart started pounding. I asked her what she meant. She tilted her head, said Mommy was trying to help me, but now she can't. Now she has to leave. I took a step closer, told her I didn't understand. Quinn's smile faded. She said, "You will." Then the lights went out. All of them. The whole house plunged into darkness. I heard Quinn giggle. It echoed. I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight, swept it across the room. Quinn was gone. I spun around, searched the corners, the closet, under the bed. Nothing. I called her name. No answer. Then I heard footsteps, running, down the hallway. I chased after them, the beam of my flashlight bouncing off the walls. I reached the stairs, saw a shadow dart down them. I followed, my legs shaking. I got to the bottom. The front door was wide open. Cold air poured in. I stepped outside. The street was empty. No sign of Quinn. I shouted her name, my voice cracking. And then I saw her, standing at the edge of the lawn, facing the street, perfectly still. I ran toward her, grabbed her shoulders, spun her around. Her eyes were closed. I shook her gently, said her name. Her eyes opened, and she started screaming. Quinn's scream cut through the night like a siren, high-pitched and raw, the kind of sound that makes your blood freeze. I pulled her close, trying to calm her, but she fought against me, her small fists pounding my chest, her legs kicking. She was screaming words, but they didn't make sense. "Get out, get out, get out." Over and over. The female officer came running from the house. She helped me carry Quinn back inside. We laid her on the couch. She was still screaming, eyes squeezed shut, body rigid. The officer tried talking to her, soft, reassuring words. But Quinn wasn't hearing any of it. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the screaming stopped. Quinn went limp. Her breathing slowed. Her eyes opened. She looked up at me, blinked, and said, "Grandpa, when did you get here?" Like nothing had happened. Like the last 20 minutes had been erased from her memory. The officer and I exchanged looks. She asked Quinn if she remembered going outside. Quinn shook her head, said she'd been sleeping. I asked her what she remembered before that. She thought for a moment, then said, "Mommy tucked me in, told me to stay under the bed until she came back. That was 4 days ago." My heart sank. 4 days. This child had been hiding under that bed for 4 days. I asked her if she'd eaten anything. She nodded, said Mommy left crackers and juice boxes. that she was only supposed to come out to use the bathroom, and even then she had to be very quiet. The officer asked why. Why did she have to be quiet? Quinn looked down at her hands, picked at a loose thread on the blanket, said because of the other mommy. She only comes when it's loud, when there's too much noise. She gets confused, thinks she's supposed to be awake. I crouched down to Quinn's level, asked her as gently as I could who the other mommy was. Quinn's eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw something in them that looked like relief, like she'd been waiting for someone to finally ask. She said the other mommy lives inside me. She's been here a long time, since before I can remember. Sometimes she sleeps, but when she wakes up, she tries to take over. Mommy said that's why we had to be quiet, so she wouldn't wake up. My hands were shaking. I asked Quinn what happens when the other mommy wakes up. Quinn's voice got smaller. She said, I go away. I can see and hear everything, but I can't control anything. The other mommy walks around in my body, says things I don't want to say, does things I don't want to do, and mommy knows. She can tell when it's not really me. The officer's radio crackled. Detective Ramos's voice came through. We're bringing her in. ETA 3 minutes. I stood up, told Quinn everything was going to be okay, that her mommy was coming home. But Quinn's face went pale. She grabbed my arm, said no. You can't let her come back here, not yet. I asked why not. Quinn's grip tightened. She said, because the other mommy wants mommy gone. She's been trying to make mommy hurt me, so they'll take her away. Then the other mommy can stay forever. Before I could respond, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Doors opening. Footsteps. Detective Ramos walked in first, then 2 uniformed officers, and between them was Marissa. She looked worse than before. Hair matted. Eyes red and swollen like she'd been crying for hours. When she saw Quinn, she lunged forward. The officers held her back. She was sobbing, saying, I'm sorry, I didn't know what else to do. Ramos told her to calm down, that she needed to answer some questions. But Marissa wasn't listening. She was staring at Quinn, and Quinn was staring back, neither of them moving. Then Marissa whispered, Is it you? Quinn didn't respond. Marissa asked again louder, Is it you, Quinn? Are you in there? Quinn tilted her head, smiled, said hi, Mommy. Marissa's face crumpled. She collapsed to her knees, started crying harder, said, thank God, it's really you. But I saw something the others didn't. The way Quinn's smile didn't reach her eyes. The way her hands gripped the edge of the blanket just a little too tight. Detective Ramos helped Marissa to a chair, started asking her questions. Where had she been? Why had she left Quinn alone? What was going on in this house? Marissa took a shaky breath, said she'd been trying to find help. Real help. Not doctors who would just put her on medication and tell her she was imagining things. She said it started 8 months ago. Quinn had begun acting strange, talking to herself, staring at walls for hours, waking up in different rooms with no memory of how she got there. At first, Marissa thought it was night terrors, sleepwalking. She took Quinn to pediatricians, therapists, sleep specialists. They all said the same thing: stress, overactive imagination, growing pains. But Marissa knew it was more than that. She said she started finding things, drawings Quinn didn't remember making, marks on the walls. And then one night she heard Quinn's voice coming from the kitchen. She went downstairs and found her standing on a chair, holding a knife. When Marissa called her name, Quinn turned around, but her face was blank, empty. She said in a voice that wasn't hers, "You're in the way." Marissa managed to get the knife away, held Quinn until whatever it was passed. And when Quinn came back, she was crying, saying she was sorry, that she didn't mean to, that the other mommy made her do it. Marissa said that's when she started documenting everything, trying to find patterns, trying to prove she wasn't crazy. She found stories online Other parents describing the same thing. Children who seemed possessed, taken over by something else. Most of them were dismissed as mental illness. But a few weren't. A few had found people who believed them, who helped them. Marissa said she'd spent the last 2 weeks trying to contact one of those people, a researcher who studied cases like this. She'd finally gotten a response 3 days ago. He'd agreed to see them, but he was halfway across the country. Marissa had been trying to figure out how to get Quinn there safely, how to keep her calm, keep the other presence dormant long enough to travel. That's why she'd told Quinn to hide, to stay quiet. She thought if Quinn stayed isolated, understimulated, the other presence wouldn't wake up. Detective Ramos listened to all of this with a carefully neutral expression. When Marissa finished, he said, "Mrs. Brennan, I think you need psychiatric evaluation. This sounds like a severe delusional episode." Marissa's face hardened. She said, "I knew you wouldn't believe me. None of you ever do. Ramos said we have evidence that suggests you've been neglecting your daughter, possibly putting her in danger. We're going to need to involve Child Protective Services." Marissa shot to her feet. Said, "No, you can't take her. You don't understand what's at stake." The officers moved toward her. She backed away. Said, "Please, just let me show you. Let me prove it." Ramos asked how. Marissa looked at Quinn. Said, "Ask her. Ask her something only Quinn would know. Something I couldn't have told her. Something she couldn't have overheard." Ramos hesitated. Then he walked over to Quinn. Knelt down. Said, "Quinn, I'm going to ask you a question. Can you tell me what your favorite stuffed animal's name is?" Quinn smiled. Said, "Mr. Whiskers." Ramos looked at Marissa. She was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. She said, "That's not right. Quinn doesn't have a stuffed animal named Mr. Whiskers. Her favorite is a rabbit named Cotton. She's had it since she was 2. She takes it everywhere." Ramos frowned, looked around the room, said, "Where is it now?" Marissa said it should be in her bed. We went back upstairs. All of us. Marissa led us to Quinn's room. She pulled back the blankets. No rabbit. She checked the shelves, the toy box, under the bed. Nothing. She was frantic now, saying, "It has to be here. Quinn never loses Cotton, never." Then the female officer said, "I found something." She was standing by the closet holding a trash bag. Inside was the rabbit, torn apart, stuffing pulled out, one of the button eyes missing. Marissa covered her mouth, stepped back, whispered, "No." Ramos asked Quinn if she knew what happened to the rabbit. Quinn shrugged. Said, "I didn't like it anymore." Marissa said, "That's not Quinn. Quinn would never do that. She loves that rabbit more than anything." Ramos said, "Kids change their minds. It doesn't mean." Marissa cut him off. "Test her again. Ask her something else." Ramos sighed. Asked Quinn what her mother's middle name was. Quinn said Elizabeth. Marissa shook her head. Said it's Marie. Quinn asked her what we did on her 5th birthday. Quinn said we went to the zoo. Marissa was crying now. Said we had a party at home, with a princess cake. You wore a purple.